Welcome to this next video in the Modern Researcher 2 module. Here we'll be looking at the importance of using visuals to enhance your speaking, be it at a research seminar or an academic conference. The first thing I need to say is that PowerPoint itself is not the enemy. It's gone through periods of having a particularly bad reputation when terms like death by PowerPoint were coined. If you want to look at what the enemy is, then these are the enemy. Slides that have too much on are the enemy of good communication. Human beings have a finite cognitive load, and slides like this just cause the brain to overload and information and understanding are lost. So PowerPoint is just a tool, and it's a good one if used well. After all, you don't blame Word for a bad essay. PowerPoint is just a great courier for visual material, and a very poor one for textual information. So don't try to make it what it's not. Fundamentally, a PowerPoint slide has one function, and that is to help your audience visualize the point you're making when it's on the screen. A list of bullet points just isn't going to do that. The reason why you should use visuals is that the brain is so good at processing them. We're able to process images ridiculously quickly. Experiments have shown that we can see and get meaning from an image in 13 milliseconds, and it may be even faster than that, because that's the fastest researchers could test due to the limitations of computer monitors. Obviously, more complex images would take longer, but that's also true of complex text. Generally, images are processed 15 times faster than text. Oh, and don't believe everything you see on the internet, where it will try to tell you that that figure is 60,000 times faster, not 15. But 15 times faster is still significant. We process images so well because 65% of the brain's neural pathways are devoted to processing visual information. Admittedly, that includes words, but different things are received by different parts of the brain. So written words and images are both received through the eye to the visual cortex, and spoken words go through the ear into the language processing parts of the brain. However, spoken and written words are interpreted in the same part of the brain, the language processing areas, and images are processed elsewhere. This is really important because it means we cannot read and listen at the same time. And if you have a slide that is just text, text, and more text, then everyone in the audience is being asked to do the impossible. They're being asked to read and listen and process both of those things in the same part of the brain, which it can't do. But you can process spoken words and images at the same time because they're being processed in different parts of the brain. Now, images can illuminate the spoken word. Images and spoken word together have been found to be more effective for learning than either by themselves. Seth Godin, the marketing guru, says there's only one reason a PowerPoint slide should exist: to make the audience want to listen. A series of bullet points does not do this. However, if there's an image on the screen, it usually needs some explaining for the viewer to get the most out of it, so the audience is primed to listen. If you can make the image something interesting or emotive or exciting or intriguing, all the better. Take a look at this slide. If I brought this up in a seminar you were attending, your instinct is probably to read the points, even before I start to talk about the first one. However, if I showed a slide like this, then you need to listen to get the full picture. The figure is shocking enough to get your attention, and the image is perhaps one that you don't necessarily associate with the concept of slavery. So that in itself is intriguing. I can then give you all the other data verbally, and you'll be able to take it in better than if you were trying to read and listen simultaneously. Here's another example. A slide with nothing but text serves literally no purpose, as all of this can be spoken. Whereas a slide like this shows that people were taken off guard, just going about their normal business, and the main point of that previous slide is made in a single sentence. But it's obvious there's more to say, and the audience would now be waiting and interested to find out what that extra information is. As well as making the audience want to listen, images can provide direct evidence of the points you're making. This is usually in the form of photographs or charts. For example, here we have a chart that directly evidences the point that's being made. Here we have photographs from scans of a mouse's brain directly showing the difference between what is happening in the waking and sleeping brain. So it's direct evidence. And here we have a picture of the adorable kakapo, one of New Zealand's flightless birds, showing its great camouflage. And this speaks for itself. As well as providing direct evidence, images can also help to get a point across more easily by enabling the audience to visualise the point that's being made and therefore help their understanding. Here's an example. Just explaining this in writing or verbally doesn't get the point across as easily as in a visualisation like this. And if you tried to explain something like this verbally, it'd be almost impossible. There are also some diagrams that are common to disciplines and are essential to show some things. Results chains like this are common in conservation science, but it could be food webs or maps or flowcharts, all different sorts of things. And sometimes images are not directly evidencing or explaining, but merely illustrating or enhancing a point. In this example, the image doesn't directly evidence the point, but it does enhance it, as does this. Now, images can also be used to create or change the atmosphere of a presentation. Something like this immediately makes you realise it's not a very academic presentation. This is more like a marketing one. It just feels different. The quirkiness of this is obviously designed to put students at their ease. Whereas something like this really makes a difficult point hit home, as does this. Another point about images is that they are part of a universal language. Certain images automatically mean something. For example, if you saw an image like this, what do you think the message is about? Take a few seconds to consider it. I imagine that most of you came to the conclusion that it was about choices. A series of doors is a common metaphor to use to represent that. Likewise, what does this represent? Again, I'll give you a few seconds. This time, we are looking quite literally at a barrier. So any message given on a slide showing something like this would clearly be referring to barriers of some kind, not necessarily physical. Images need to be appropriate to their topic, to their audience, and to the moment. Some of those I've shown you here may not be appropriate for a PhD seminar, but others will. But whatever, they need to be a good quality. So don't use generic clip art. Avoid images like this that are obviously just generic images and show a lazy approach to finding the most appropriate image. They're also very dating. The screen beans in the third image here were all the rage back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and they've since been replaced by the even more ubiquitous white men clip art like those in the second image here that dominates so many stock image sites. And I'm sure these themselves will become dated very quickly. The images on the last slide all represented teamwork, as do these, but they are very cliched. Be especially careful if you're using stock images of people. Most show young people in business wear and rarely represent the type of people you're referring to in research presentations. Make sure images of people represent the right people. When PowerPoint slides are projected or are shown full screen on a PC or laptop that you're sitting close to, then images need to be high resolution so that they're not pixelated or blurred. As a general rule, A full screen image should be at least 1000 pixels wide. If it's going to be half the screen, look for half the pixels. Remember, when you click on an image after a Google image search and hover over the preview on the right of the screen, it will tell you the size in pixels. In the same vein, be careful not to distort an image when you resize it. Using the corner handles and resizing diagonally will keep the correct aspect ratio. Using the top, bottom, left or right handles will distort it and make the image look very unprofessional. If you have limited space, crop the image to fit that space rather than distort it. Once you've cropped an image, you can move it around inside its boundaries to see which part looks best in the space you have. This image would be better to represent teamwork. No people to worry about getting the right type, not too cliched, and big enough to fill the space I need. The blurring on this one is intentional. The crucial parts are sharp. And, whilst you're looking at an image that represents working together, if possible, you should choose images that work together. So here are 6 slides from a business presentation about Mintzberg's theory of 5 Ps of strategic thinking. See how the images have been chosen to work together, all using black and white line drawings. Here's the same presentation using photographs or photographic representations. And here using only icons. All 3 presentations work well because there's a sense of consistency due to the image choices. Had they been mixed up, even if the fonts and background styles had been consistent, it wouldn't have worked as cohesively. And finally, I want to consider using images ethically. You've already seen a video that considers copyright, which is certainly an important part of using images ethically, so I'm not going to cover that here. Instead, I want you to think about at what point photo editing becomes photo manipulation. So this is a very early example of image editing, though this time it's a composite produced from woodcuts and engravings. The head of Abraham Lincoln edited onto the body of the former Vice President John Calhoun. Although there was clearly an element of deception here, it was reportedly done with the best of intentions after Lincoln's assassination, and as a consequence of there being so few images of him looking particularly heroic. You're probably never going to do anything as blatant as this, but there are degrees of photo editing, and at some point you may think it is acceptable and at other points not. So I'm going to leave you with an ethical conundrum which we will discuss at the session on Thursday. This is an electron microscope photo of the results of an experiment. I have no idea what it represents, but the person doing this experiment was particularly happy to see that whatever this is had formed these groups of 3 and that it made this regular pattern. So here's the original image. Do we think it would be okay to adjust the contrast to make the image clearer? Would it be okay to remove blemishes, like these here? Would it be okay to crop it to show an area that best represented the findings? Can we remove outliers, like these little bits here? And can we reconstruct it? So we pick some of the good examples and paste them over those that don't represent it as well. So which of these do we think is acceptable? I'm not going to give you the answers now. We'll talk about this on Thursday. So images are powerful aids. They can increase both engagement and understanding of the material in your presentations. They can be the difference between an average presentation and an outstanding one. But remember, your slides are not your presentation, you are. Remember Seth Godin's mantra, the slides are there to make the audience want to listen to what you have to say. And that is the most important part of any presentation. Thank you for watching, and if you have any queries, please contact the Skills team.